if I told you Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan, and Daniel Craig, obviously you guys know who that is because that's James Bond. And then if I tell you Peter Burton, John Cleese, and Ben Whishaw, I bet you that none of you know who that is or what the relationship is between those. But those actors actually played the same character in James Bond, which is Q. And Q is the guy who basically designs all the technology for James Bond when he goes to missions. So while everyone always wanted to be James Bond when they were young, I was that scorny kid on the side wanting to be Q. So here's a little bit more about myself. My name is Eliott Ephrati. So I'm doing a Master in Design for Technology right now at Harvard University. And I'm 22 years old, and I build things. I build computers, robotic arms, and this cool innovation called the Sky Mouse, but we'll get into that later. I'm here to tell you about learning how to learn. So there's this famous Harvard psychologist. His name is Howard Gardner. He has a theory about multiple intelligences and a unique blend of learning strategies that people use. Different people have different ways of learning. And in a way, we all have 5 senses. Those senses are pretty much creating your perspective when it's being triggered. When that is being triggered, it creates your new reality. And that reality itself ends up becoming an experience. And that experience becomes whatever creates your logic. So it's clearly impossible for 2 people to have the exact same experience at the exact same time. So we all end up with different realities and different ways of learning. So now here's the puzzle. With our different ways of learning, our different perspective, different realities, different experience, why is it that we are all trained to learn the same way? Learning, for the better part of your life, is standardized, routinized, and sometimes boring. So I wanted to talk to you here about that issue. And I was thinking about how would we solve this problem? And really much we need to get to Finland. So in Finland, in 2003, they were the #1 in math, reading, and sciences. Interestingly enough, they have the weirdest, or maybe the most unorthodox way of teaching compared to us. And here's a few things that they do. The first 7 years or 6 years of the student's life, students don't have any tests. Students also have 75 minutes of recess, and teachers only teach for 4 hours a day. And 2 hours after that is for their own professional development. So Finland doesn't just teach what to learn to the student, but they teach how to learn. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So I started violin when I was 3 years old. And when I say that to people, usually they tell me the same thing, like, you played for so long, you must be so good. And musician knows basically that it's not about how much you've played, but how you play. So I didn't know that when I entered college. And when I entered UCLA for a music major, I was working as hard as possible. 6 hours every day, 7 days a week, to just achieve as much as possible. And that resulted actually in a tendinitis. Tendinitis that was so severe on my left hand that while I thought that I was actually playing with my left hand, it wasn't actually moving. So I had to see a chiropractor, and he told me something that was really interesting. He told me, in order for you to continue playing the violin, if you do want to do it, you have to change the way you play. So I was kind of shocked because when you see this happening, I've been learning violin since I was 3 years old. I had 15 years under my belt about practicing, and he tells me that I'm supposed to relearn everything. I'm supposed to take a cup that was already full and just like refill it. So I did my research. I did a little bit of research on the internet. I started looking at the grand virtuosos and how they play. I started looking into Itzhak Perlman, Jascha Heifetz, Oistrakh. But there was this one person, Adrian Antoine, who was born with a hand defect that wouldn't let him grow his hand like as older he gets. And it's already difficult to play with two hands, but he found a way, and his own way, to learn how to play. And that's when it struck me that we are all pretty much different individuals, and we have to learn how to learn with our own ways. So for the violin, in my part, I started by breaking everything down to the most primitive level. A shift, for instance, going from one note to the next. Instead of thinking about going from one note to the next just on that aspect, I started thinking more about how to shift, about the most primitive aspect, which is what you do when you first start. Take off the finger, move the hand, and press it back. So I ended up learning how to learn, and with that, I was able to play anything on the violin. But I'm not here to tell you about this. In a way, what really happened was I created a system for myself. I learned how to learn, and that's my message for you. But before that even happens, there was a few things that I need to do, including failing. So when I was 15, I started doing competitions. And on the violin. And I got first place, actually, in my competition. But I started feeling super cocky. You know, I started going around just pretending like I was beating everybody on the violin. And then after that, I went to my second competition. I stopped practicing. I didn't even warm up. So I went there, played. It was so bad that the juries actually stopped me from playing in the middle of the competition. And, you know, it's pretty embarrassing when you think about it. You're there, and there's like, it's okay, just stop. So when that happened, I started looking back actually into why that happened. And I found something about myself. So for instance, I learned that confidence teaches me about going forward and drive and starting, but being cocky stops me from me to learn. So when that happened, I know it's a very specific case, but in a way, I learned a lot more about myself through that failure. And many people tell you, you have to learn about your failures. Learn from your mistakes. But what no one really tells you is how to learn from those mistakes. And what you have to do is analyze the situation, look back, and see what you've done recently, and try again. And that's what I did. And we'll see that in what happens next. And this is why learning how to learn is very important. So, why is this relevant? Or what is it that it works on the violin? Would it work for anything else? And my question is more like this. Would it be useful to do the system somewhere else? And let me give you an example. So when I was in senior year of college, I started playing this game called Diablo 3. Great game. Except my computer couldn't handle it. So I ended up having to find a way to play it, maybe a new computer. So then I started being interested in the computer itself and learning how to make the computer. So I did my research. I got the parts. I put it together. I turned it on, and I blew all the fuses in my house. So other than dealing with the screams of my parents, I had to actually, what I did is I analyzed what happened. I looked back and had a positive attitude about where I was going to go forward with that. And then I was reminded of this quote, actually. If you learn anything from video games, is that when you encounter an enemy, it means you're going in the right direction. So in the end, I built this really cool computer. And after that, I started getting more excited. I'm like, oh, I can build something. Now I can build more. I can start doing more. And with that, I wanted to learn more about just simple electronics. But if I were to be exactly the same way that I did from the violin competition, I would have just tried to move forward without any knowledge any foundation from that knowledge. So instead, what I did is I went back to the most primitive level also. I went to the second grade electronics, because I had no knowledge from that whatsoever. I went to the second grade electronics. I went to even buy a starting kit, just so that you have one LED that blinks on and off. So in one part I had an LED that was blinking, so a light that was blinking. In the other hand I had a computer. But learning, going back to the basics, really made me a foundation for the future in electronics. And it's not until you learn how to learn that you do realize that a part of learning is actually unlearning. So after that, after many hours and many trials and errors and everything, I started looking into that product called the Sky Mouse. And I always had a vision about people using their computer just like a conductor controls an orchestra with his baton. So take a look. So here's the takeaways. I want you to forget everything that you know. I know, but it will work. I want you to, while forgetting, I want you also to start over and do it your own way. Write about it, read it, experience it, express it, feel it, dance it. No matter how you learn, it's your way. And I want you to go out there and fail until you succeed. But most of all, I want you to start. Start learning and start doing. Thank you.